What was hugely hyped up but flopped? I told my kids about this. They made like an hour episode and tons of commercials, and my parents watched it because I wanted to see it. I had drank a gallon of the hype. I remember my dad getting annoyed at the whole thing. He said ain't a damn thing in that vault worth anything. There was a broken vase if I remember. Then it was bedtime. I lost trust in the world that day. Honestly, the movie shouldn't have been PG-13, an R rating, which as far as I know was actually the original focus, would have been much better, as then the movie would have been more like the creepypasta and not like a child's fan fiction. It sucks the R rating was cut, but would someone think of the CH Shield Ren? Question mark. My cousin texted me the day that we were all supposed to die. She said, "Is anything happening?" And I was like, "What do you mean, number?" "Nothing is happening," she really said. "Oh, well, you live in a time zone ahead of us by 2 hours. I thought stuff would happen over there on the East Coast first." I fucking died. The thought of the world imploding on itself but still following time zones is fantastic. I actually broke up with my girlfriend at the time because she wouldn't shut up about how the world was going to end because the magnetic poles were going to flip and the Mayans had predicted it. I loved her, but I eventually just came to the realization that she was a fucking idiot and we had no future together. She was also very into Kone 2012, which was extremely cringe. I was in film school when it was released. We had to get it to talk about the future of streaming. I watched 2 episodes of something, then cancelled my account. Edit, copied and pasted from my comment below. The point of the assignment was never to tell us it was the future of streaming. It was to start a conversation on where streaming was going. It was a service different than the rest, and many of us agreed it didn't work. I don't think Quibi was ever going to do that well, but they shot themselves in the foot by not allowing viewers to screenshot or screen record the content. I get obviously it's a piracy concern, but the demographic they seem to be targeting, Gen Z, young millennials, share shit via memes and screen grabs. They had Megan Thee Stallion on an episode of the Quibi Punk reboot and I've barely seen a photo of it, whereas Google any of her other appearances and there's memes, videos, discourse. To take it one step further, I would also list Victoria Justice in the same mold. To be fair, while she never got arrested or reportedly lived in Disney World like Drake, her career didn't have trajectory her peers did. Victorious was designed from the get-go for Nick to launch their own star in the vein of what Hannah Montana did for Disney and Miley Cyrus, but with Victoria. However, Ariana Grande was the breakout star from the show, and afterwards her musical career launched into the stratosphere. He did a nationwide tour in 2016-2017 in the US, going to different high schools, and he came to mine and did a concert. Supposedly he only did the tours because he was bankrupt. Dude looked really bad and there was zero life in his eyes as he sang. Edit, here's a link to him singing the Drake and Josh theme. I was young and crinny in high school, so ignore the rest of my page lol. Edit 2. Remove the link because someone informed me I was doxing myself. I'm silly. I knew his mother years ago, Robin Bell. She was a professional pool player back in the day. Sadly, she was one of those that cling to her child's success and tried to make that hers, and now she's vanished. Make your own life, don't live through anyone else. She could have been great. Cases like him and Victoria Justice are so interesting. During the era of Disney and Nickelodeon manufactured teen stars, these two seemingly had it all. Hit show featuring them, the backing and support of a major studio and all the money, access, and songwriters. But it just didn't click for those two, among others. And it's not like there were huge irredeemable qualities about the people. Back then, it wasn't even a case of they're actually not good actors or musicians that have just been hiding behind shitty Disney material. No, they were both pretty decent at their art. Just didn't click. VJ case is more interesting knowing how big Ariana got from that. Imagine being the lead and to be outdone by not even the second main character in the show but a fucking third string side group character. My wife and I were very late to the GOT party. We watched the whole series for the first time during the COVID lockdown. We watched it knowing the last season was a huge disappointment to fans, but thought how bad could it really be? Everyone still recommends watching it, even knowing it was a letdown. We were still let down. Way worse than I thought a show of that caliber go be. Atkins diet asked food items at fast food restaurants in like 2008 or whatever it was. They came and they went like the wind. I remember KFC tried to get in the game at the time by claiming their chicken was healthy because it was low in carbs. That went down like a lead balloon. Then Dan didn't qualify. For those who weren't paying attention, in 1992, he performed in the 10-event decathlon in the U.S. Olympic trials, where you must place in the top 3 to make the Olympic team. He missed all 3 chances at his chosen opening height in the pole vault, thus scoring 0 points in that event and ruining his total score. I put a new coat of some all-weather sealant on this lady's playground set for her little kids. I was 13, it was summer, God, and she asked my dad if I could help her out. 6 hours later, she pays me with one single beanie baby. This is gonna be worth a lot of money one day. Your afternoon of work has made you rich as an adult. Fucking bullshit. From what I've heard from most Broadway fans is the appeal of the musical was in the dance numbers, not the plot. It was a horrible musical to try adapt. They should have just gone with the low-budget approach. They might have broken even just from Broadway fans, but a budget of several $100 million was never going to be successful. Interestingly enough, the original theater cut of the movie was essentially a work print. It had all kinds of missing gear. I'm talking lots of shoes, regular hands, very visible tattoos and earrings, white sleeves near hands instead of gaffer, etc. My friends and I purposely found a theater showing that version and laughed our asses off, but as a work print collector, I'd kill to have a proper unfinished copy. This is a big problem with society in general. Y2K, we spent the money and fixed it, so everyone was like, well, that was overhyped. What a waste of money. If we had actually prepared for coronavirus like we should have, people would have said the same thing. Y2K could have been really bad, but we spent the time and money to fix the problem. An estimated $100 billion was spent making sure Y2K didn't fuck us. It very much was a big deal. I still have it installed. I have not tried to see if it communicates with my Zune HD. Found it in my stuff about 6 months ago. Maybe this is the jolt I need for running additional investigation. RIP Zune though, the superior device and audio playback program. I still can't believe how crummy the iTunes interface remains. Out. No, absolutely not. Look, I own the Zune, too. In fact, I fucking loved them and I agree that they were 10x better than the iPod. But they didn't fail because Apple is a cult. They failed because Apple released the iPod in 2001 and Microsoft released the Zune in 2006. And the second-gen Zune, the first one I had, the one that was actually really great, didn't come out until after the goddamn iPhone. The device that spelled the beginning of the end for standalone MP3 players. That's why the Zune failed, because it was way too goddamn late. I feel that I'm 21 and I know I've got more days ahead of me than behind me, but I can't help but wonder why I made the decisions I've made. Some of the ones my parents hate, I'd still double down on, but most of them are related to things that I didn't even realize I'd come to care about later on. I mean, shit. If I played tennis in high school, I would have had something in common with my crush 2 years ago. If I worked on my art skill, I could be writing a webcomic that's making bank on Patreon. I hope you're still young like me, though, because I still have my hopes up for the future. The 10-year plan is to get 3 or 4 novels published, learn Japanese, read or give away all the books I own, play or give away all the video games I own, learn how to do witchcraft, and find love. After that, I'll probably be tying the unresolved threads, but as long as I've shared one good story and I'm not getting hounded by debt collectors, I'll call myself a success. It's never too late to start doing something you might succeed at, after all. Yeah, came here for this one. What I was promised was the magnum opus of Will Wright, a huge name at the time, giving you the full civilization treatment from single-celled organism up to a full space empire. What I got was 4 flash minigames and a space exploration game with all the depth of Dora the Explorer. That being said, the tech behind the creature creation was impressive, there was just very little game attached. Last time I heard about Q, they were holding out for one of the Kennedys who supposedly didn't die in a plane crash but was instead transferred into a robot body. He was going to lead a group of Cuban cyborgs to take the Capitol back in the name of Trump. Jesus. Who knows though, it was probably just to throw us off their real plan/s. That's actually pretty interesting. The Stuff You Should Know podcast did a great episode on Y2K. Evidently there truly was a substantial threat to tech infrastructure which required a pretty massive undertaking to mitigate. The success of that undertaking has led to a mistaken perception that Y2K was a bunch of nonsense. The ozone layer story is starting to go that way. You don't hear about it anymore, so it must not have been that big of a deal. No. We banned certain destructive refrigerants and so it's recovering and continues to be a seasonally fluctuating hole limited to the vicinity of the South Pole. It would absolutely be an increasingly big deal if we just kept tearing it up. One of the lecturers at my college's IT department told us that New Year's Eve he was getting drunk at a party while technically being on call and getting paid from about 5 different companies. He gave their staff a half glance a month before, knew everything would be fine, and they insisted on having someone on standby anyway. Even if unjustified, the panic was real. The Edsel. It was supposed to be a technological showcase. It had an electronically operated push-button automatic transmission. In 1958, the buttons were mounted on the steering wheel. It offered its own brand-specific engines. It was the car of the future, and it was only slightly more expensive than a Ford. But when it came out, you got an overly complicated Ford with a chrome Vagina for a grille. It also didn't help that Chrysler had been offering its much more reliable and much less complicated mechanical push-button operated automatic transmissions since 1955. Even Plymouth's had it since 1956. The line was done by 1960 and is still seen as a complete failure. Oh, and the miracle push-button automatic only lasted 1 year and was replaced with a more conventional column shift. The fucking Ouya came onto Kickstarter talking about totally changing gaming. Small and medium-sized companies wanted to publish on it. Goddamn Best Buy was stalking it. Then the mask was off. An Android-flavored box top that didn't have enough power to emulate the N64 well, much less run serious games. Initially regretted not backing it, then breathed a huge sigh of relief. Hype was insane and totally misplaced. I've often said that the best way to do a commercial for it, at least in the US, would be to recreate the Wii commercials that had the 2 Japanese men knocking on doors saying we would like to play, but to instead have them say we would like to play with you. Those Wii commercials were reasonably memorable and it would have felt like a natural extension of them. That was a marketing failure on Coca-Cola's part. An example of theory not translating into practice. New Coke fared better in taste tests than other colas, and Coca-Cola was already allowing bottlers to use corn syrup instead of sugar, so it shouldn't have failed on paper. What they perhaps should have done was accept the risk of the 2 products competing and market both New Coke and Coke Classic at the same time. Zip disks. By all accounts, they should have destroyed CDs in the computing market. This was in 1994, when 3.5 inches floppies with the 1.4 megabytes capacity were still not all that uncommon for media delivery, although CDs were starting to dominate. Zip disks could hold up to 250 megabytes each at launch, and up to 750 megabytes later. Problem? Just too expensive to mass-produce for distribution compared to CDs. Ultimately, software publishers went with the cheaper option and adopted CDs as their standard format. Cyberpunk 2077, super hyped up and shilled all over the place, and then a half-baked turd was shipped by managers, executives, and shareholders who couldn't give less of a fuck. The employees working on the project wanted it to be great, but management was a clusterfuck. People were working on things that were already completed by other teams. The game was started again from the ground up a year or so before release. Don't pre-order games or buy on after release day. You enabled this bullshit. Are patient gamers. Washing your hands as the primary mechanism for avoiding COVID. If the world embraces face coverings and homemade masks in March 2020, I truly believe we'd have far less cases today and COVID would not have been quite as economically devastating. Let's remember this for the next respiratory virus pandemic. The world needs to put their mask on the minute the WHO declares a pandemic next time. The Ouya. It was supposed to be this awesome little video game console that was designed to get indie developers seen. It was also to be cheap for consumers at only $100, with every game made for the system having a free version of some kind. Each system could also double as a dev kit, making it really easy for prospective developers to get their games on the system. When it hit Kickstarter, it blew up and broke just about every Kickstarter record at the time. They had so much success with the Kickstarter that even major game developers and publishers like Sega and Square Enix started to pay attention and even released some games on the platform early on. When the system launched, however, most of the games available were low-quality mobile trash, and no one really wanted it anymore. The major game companies jumped ship really early, and the system crashed and burned hard. The few exclusives that were actually interesting would go on to see success on other platforms, like Towerfall and Duck Game. Now, the system is about as useful as a paperweight, as the online servers have been shut down. Microsoft Zune. It was going to be the iPod's rival, but it never really hung around a long time, and now MP3 players are kinda not around anymore because of phones. On a lesser note, Microsoft phones. Had one for my first smartphone and learned quickly they didn't keep apps updated. I actually still haven't used my Zune HD one to this day, but it never did a lot. As it is now, I know it can't use the internet at all since it can't update. Probably can't get the apps anymore either. I recall a story where someone thought it was a good idea to get 3 Zune tattoos, and then when it flopped wanted Microsoft to pay for the tattoo removal. I had to meet a girl. I got along very well with her and I talked often, so I thought I'd take the big step, go with her on a date. She accepted and I was quite happy about it. The day we were supposed to meet, I arrive a little early and start waiting for her. I was already waiting for 15 minutes, so I send a message to know if anything had come in. In another 5 minutes I get a message from her that she can't come anymore as she has to meet with another guy. Not the best day. Facebook. It was meant to connect people, which it arguably did in the beginning, but now it's led to making people feel alienated and depressed due to all the fake BS people post pretending like their shit lives are better than your shit life, as well as becoming a huge fake news source connecting vulnerable people, voters to even more misinformed citizens, creating an echo chamber consisting of your worst fears to confuse and misinform millions, fuck up elections, and make people really hate one another by only bringing people together by their shared hatred for others. Facebook barely bothered to even pretend like it was sorry. Define flop, because yes, it has been monetarily successful, but overall Facebook has become a destructive national liability and data mining nightmare, with a business model designed to rape our personal information and sell it to any company with the dollar to hand over. All recent movements. Tax the rich, BLM, stop Asian hate, Me Too, etc. All that happens is more people are aware and think about the cause, but no actual decent changes have been made. Unfortunately, the scummy rich pricks aren't getting taxed. Nothing is happening to them. Cops are still targeting black people and not having to face any consequences. Crimes against Asian people are still happening, nothing preventing it. And still no one gives a shit about women, and that abortion ban in Texas happened. Google Glasses, generally a good idea, but the market was not ready. I think that if they had taken the time to address concerns upfront and present solutions regarding privacy, the results might have been better. Also, The looks were quite bad. Wearing glasses is fine, but these looked too much like a gadget.